Colm, what do you think about academic plans?
So I think the academic plan is in many ways the key to addressing how we deal with the cohort affected by disability in the university. And I guess the critical thing for me is to not think of the academic plan as either a straitjacket in terms of how we deal with students, nor is it a sort of a slavish approach that forces academics to do particular things in relation to students. But really it should be a blueprint about that student and that unit and the experience that student is going to have. Because at the end of the day, the critical thing is, we admit the student to a unit. We have the responsibility, therefore, to ensure that the student has the absolute best chance possible to complete that unit. That's our moral responsibility as educators. And in that context, I think the academic plan provides unlocks the key to doing that.
What happens if the academic plan sort of compromises your integrity? For example, if your assessment items are changed in the academic plan?
Well, I think, sure, there's going to have to be bend and sway here. Again, I think I would urge colleagues to first of all, walk in the shoes of the student here. The student is facing a particular challenge, and they're not trying to disrupt the class. They're not trying to disrupt how you are delivering it and what you want to do as part of that unit in whatever aspect, assignment, assessment, and so on. But rather, they're really just trying to complete the unit. I think that's the kind of first important point to say. I think the second point is that, within the context of the learning plan, the academic plan, I should say, is that, the learning outcome is probably the critical thing to focus on. If you kind of spool back to that, then the point of what we're trying to do in the class is get the student to the point where we can say, yes, they've completed that learning outcome. That is what defines, ultimately, completion of the unit. Even more so in the work we're doing on our new curriculum from 2018, the learning outcome is a key driver, perhaps more so than before. So I think if we can take the learning outcome as our kind of starting point, that's what defines each of those learning outcomes for a unit, defines whether a student has successfully completed the unit. We can then find ways of aligning what a student has done to that learning outcome. And that may require, to be frank, some adjustment in what you want to do. There's no question that I think we can say hand on heart that it won't require an academic colleague to perhaps bend and flex a little to deliver that. But if I think if we make the learning outcome the key, then we can kind of see that completion of a unit successfully requires meeting the objectives of the learning outcome. And that's a useful way of approaching the problem.
So if an academic plan wasn't completely fulfilling learning outcomes, maybe you could make some adjustments to the academic plan.
Yeah, and I think the earlier and sooner everybody's involved in the academic plan, the better. The more we can get out ahead of the problem and evolve an academic plan, ideally interactively, between the student, the academic involved, and disability services and other colleagues working together. In a sense, take ownership of and take carriage of the issue right from the start, and as early as we can, rather than, in a sense, in a reactionary way later on in the course of a semester.
That's really useful. Thanks very much.